I'm Miss Christie from Art for All, and today we're going to learn how to do hand drawings. So at first, before we start drawing anything, it's always better to understand the sizes of your object that you want to put down on the paper. So I recommend everybody who's beginner learner to trying to measure how big do you want this object and the stuff that you want to put down on the paper. So you see, at first I will be doing some measurement, roughly limiting how big I'm going to be drawing. So I'll be using mostly the top part of the paper. And then I'll be starting to put down some simple shapes of a hand. So no, don't worry about making wrong lines when we first putting down some simple shapes, because right now at this stage we're still in the really sketchy phase. So don't worry about making mistakes. We just gotta keep our lines really clean and smooth. Trying to not draw too hard so we can have rooms for ourselves to do some changes. So when I draw hands, I really like to draw down the knuckles with circles. And then I'll be putting down some rectangular shapes or a really thin cylinders to represent the fingers. This time I'll be drawing female hands, so they're a little bit more skinny, more slimmed. They have longer fingernails, kind of different than drawing a male hands. They appear more soft, and they are usually a little more round and sharp in the fingers. What I mean by round is not the finger itself being round, but it's more the lines that we use to draw females mostly is more curvy and more round comparing to drawing male. Okay, this is another one that we're doing. Usually I really like to make a simple geometric straight shape that looks like the gesture of the hands before I even apply the knuckles. And a really good tip of drawing hands is really good to add the connection point of the wrist. So you can easily tell how the hand is formed. Adding a little bit of sleeves would also help for the audience to understand that you're drawing a human hand. So I'm still adding more circles and rectangles. More like cylinders, actually. Okay. Make sure the angle when you put down the fingers, they're all facing the same way, because that's how human structure works. The perspective of the anatomy, you have to make sure they're all following the same direction so it doesn't feel off. Okay, so far we already have a shape of both hands. It's a little light, but which is a good start, because the more we draw, we're gonna just keep adding it darker to make it feel more complete and make it feel more realistic while we rendered and add shadings. Usually for our fingers that is kind of close to each other, I recommend to do a big shape before we separate it in the middle. We can even add a little bit of fingernails on the tip to indicate the feelings and indicate the fingers' movements. And it also would show the personality of the person that we drew, based off how they take care of their hands. If it's for character design, you can also add like gloves, other kinds of accessory rings to show that the class, the background, and the personality of their characters. Drawing hands can really also like show how much detail an artist is putting in their works. So right now, we already have like a simple structure of a female hand. There's also another really good thing to check when you're drawing hands, is that you can draw a nice arch from the thumbs all the way to the pinkies. Usually it will be an arch that our middle finger will be the longest. So we can use that as like a way, or almost like a ruler, to check when we draw hands. So gotta make sure the thumb is short, so as the pinky. And we can use that to measure and change our lines. Like what I'm doing here. So for female hands, I'll definitely put more emphasis on the fingernail to make it feel more elegant. and more feminine touch to the drawing. Also, be careful when you're drawing a fingernail that is upside down in a different perspective. They definitely shape differently. Individual ones are also shaped differently, which we need to be really careful. And some people has like different lengths on their fingers. Not everybody's the same because we're human beings and we don't look the same. Make sure you find references before you draw any characters, animals, or creature, just any creature in general. So we have a good understanding of the anatomy. Also be patient. Patience is the key to be successful when drawings or paintings or do anything actually. So I also tend to really like to clean up the outer line of my drawing so I can see like a clearer shape and base sketch for me to moving on and then starting to add lighting and details. Sometimes we can use hand or feet or just like a part of a person to tell a story without showing the faces and the full body of a character. Because our body language is also a really good medium to tell a story, and for artists, we don't really need to just use a normal full body character to pose in a certain poses to deliver a message or a story. Learning how to draw individual limbs or parts of a human being is really useful when it comes to communicating your idea behind the work. Like how I'm drawing this two hands, you can see that they're feminine, so the character who have these hands is probably a girl. And they take good care of their hands, right? And you can see the nails are pretty long that I'm doing. So they are probably not a working class. But it's just a hypothesis, right? So most of the stuff is open book for the audience to imagine. Adding the last fingernails over here. I'm trying to make this pinky a little bit more detailed. We can also add a little darker in between the fingers. So here's our base sketch of this hand. Part 2 will be talking about how we start applying shadow shapes and trying to put down the difference between the negative area and the positive area, which means it's the light and shadow. Welcome back to the second part of this video, and now we're going to be talking about how to apply shadow and light. So usually when we draw hands, we'll make sure that where the light direction is going to be. And for this one, this time I'm going to be putting the light source on top, down. So this hand is going to be on top of this one, so which will create a shadow shape on this hand. And we can just start putting some lines to indicate the shadow. Make sure whenever we draw a shadow shape, we have to wrap it based off the form of the hand. We can add some other shadows, which we call the form shadow, which is a lot softer than the cast shadow, which these ones would be the cast shadow because they're a lot more concrete, like the lines are a lot more clear and it's not as soft. But sometimes a cast shadow can also have a pretty soft edges. And for this hand, mostly this part will be a lot darker since the light source is from the top. And this whole area will be in the shadow. I'm still fixing some mistakes and some lines that I don't really like. Remember, because we're trying to do a good drawing. So make sure that you double checking if everything looks right to you. Okay, that's a lot better. Okay. This thumb is getting a little bit too big in my opinion. Okay. And we're gonna keep applying the shadow to darken the hand. So I will also use this time to even make these lines a lot more clean. And when it's in between two objects, collide together, we can add a little bit darker and make it feels like they're on top of each other. And we can also add some shading, trying to form the roundness of the finger. I also really like to add a little darker corner to the nails so they feel a little more defined. And there will be a little bit of a cast shadow over here. So it's here. You're gonna add more shadow in it. You gotta be patient with this step because it might be harder to erase once we're starting to apply shadow. And usually I like to hold my pens like this, so it's a lot easier to apply a shading with the balanced tone, with like the same value of tone. And sometimes when it comes to the turning point of a object, the middle part between the turning point, like this cylinder of this hand, like the wrist area, this part will be darker. Gotta make sure that we don't forget about that. Even the area that is like in the receiving a lot of light, like in the light area, we still want to add a little bit of a shading to it so you can identify the tone of the skin. We can also add a little bit of shading in the knuckle area to indicate the hand movement. It's always a lot easier for a beginner to put down the lines, every single lines of the shadow before even start shading it. And we can work on the second hand, which we already drawn out some shadow shapes. And we can apply the shading evenly. Make sure to add shadow in between fingers so it will feel a lot more realistic to create like a form. So I will be also adding the rest of the shadow and then render them a little bit, and I'll come back to part 3 that I'll be adding the background a little bit, trying to frame this hand and also do some final touch up before I call this drawing a finish. So here, after we apply all these shadows, they're like the basic shadows, and we can keep going and adding details and trying to complete this drawing. So for the touch up that I will be teaching right now is we're trying to make sure that each knuckles and the bones of our hand will be like sort of like showing when we apply details. We can apply like some tiny lines and shadings to indicate each knuckles. Make sure that you don't go over the board and add too dark, because usually it's not really that visible in like pictures. And if you add too dark on it, it will make the person's hand like feel really old. Unless you want to draw like an old person's hand. Shadow is really good for us to show how curved the object is. And don't forget to use your eraser to draw out the light sometimes if you're applying too much shading on certain area. And usually in between two fingers, they're gonna have more, a little bit of a darker area over there. Adding some shading on the side of the finger is gonna make the finger feel a lot more rounder. So for most of the students, I recommend them to use like a normal graphite pencil or even charcoal pencil to do this, because using a color pencil like what I'm doing is going to be really hard for beginners to change the lines, because once you put down like a harder lines with a color pencil, you can't erase them. But for some students who want some challenges and want to practice their line to make sure that every stroke that they put down is like really accurate, then you can try to use more color pencil when it draws. Using different colors can also help to have different feelings to it. And this time I use a brown, so it feels more like a skin tone, but at the same time is create a sense of like a classical feelings to our drawings. Also, using a warm color can help make our images feel a lot more warm, a lot more like cozy. It makes people feel like they are more comfortable looking at your drawing than like a cool color, which is like blue or green, and any kinds of other more poisonous color like purple, like blue purple. So we can keep adding these detail in. We can even add like a little detail to the nails. Make sure the tip part is leave blank, because our nail, if it doesn't have any nail polish on it, is usually transparent on the tip. Controlling our strength when it comes to like drawing and painting is really important, because in order to make different shades, some shades are darker, some of them are lighter, we need to really control like how much pressure we're putting in on each stroke. The more shading we have on a drawing, and make sure there's light and dark, is the key to make a drawing feel more realistic. So you see me would be adding a layer of shading and then keep adding on top if I need it to be a lot darker than the other shade.
Excuse me, is anyone here? Why are you not opening the door? And you're in the house. I was just about to lock it. I will not open the door, okay? You just go to your
And after we do these general detail and shading, in order to make the drawing feel a lot more complete, we can add some darker background to it, which is gonna shape out the object and the focus. Of our drawing. It will make the light part feel even more bright when you put a really dark background color to it. I usually make a outline before I start adding the background. Make sure when you do this step, you have to be really careful and don't ruin the rest of your drawing. So I will be adding some faux to this hand. It makes it feel like it's like a sleeve. In order to do that, I'll be drawing out a little bit of faux, and then this part will be a lot lighter. And some part will be darker to indicate the cloth. So when I draw cloth, usually I'll make sure that the folds are going with like a certain way, so they feels like they're all coming from the same direction when you wrap around the cloth. I need to sharpen my pencil real quick. We can even use this step to shape out the hands. Adding a dark background can also make the skin tone a lot lighter. And if we want a darker skin tone, we can just go over the skin with another layer. We can even add like a little bit of design to the background in like a certain shape to make it feel more like a designed piece. drawing out the background so it has a little bit more of a minimalistic panel to the drawing.
Yeah, sure. Alright, 10 more minutes, guys. If you're not finished yet, people like it. Okay, what I said. Don't be rushed, okay? Instead, this kind of canvas. Not a canvas? Yeah. But not. I'm gonna feel that. It's not very thick. I mean, you okay with this one? Or already have some? Or something like this. Sure. This is way too big.
So normally you'll be wanting to blend these background a lot better, but right now because of the time that I couldn't be able to blend every single area on this video, but this is pretty much the whole tutorial of how to draw hands. So